Hello and welcome to your next class of International Relations. In today's class, we will be discussing about one of the most important bodies working under the aegis of the United Nations. Today, we'll be discussing about the United Nations Human Rights Council. As the name suggests, the UN Human Rights Council is a body that has been made responsible for ensuring that human rights as a concept and as a principle are upheld around the entire world. Now, in the absence of having any international government at the international level, the problem is countries around the world are free to make different types of laws. While liberal countries, most of the developed countries, and many developing countries also have ensured that human rights are given to their citizens, the unfortunate part is there are still many nations around the world which have not given the most basic freedom to their own citizens. And this is where the UNHRC plays an extremely important role. As a UN body made responsible for looking into the human rights related issues around the entire world, this body makes sure that nations around the world are sticking to the idea of human rights, that nations around the world understand the importance of human rights, and everyone around the world, irrespective of their nationality, irrespective of their religion, their gender, their caste, is provided certain minimal basic human rights. Now, the story of the UN Human Rights Council actually starts from UN Human Rights Office of the High Commissioner. It is the same body that has been made responsible for ensuring that human rights are given due importance around the entire world. Now, in this particular class, we will be discussing each and everything that we need to know about the concept of human rights and also the UN Human Rights Council. We'll be starting our discussion with what exactly do we mean by human rights, who are the members of this body, the UN Human Rights Council, what is the structure and the functions performed by the UNHRC, the connection between India and this body, the achievements that this body has made over the past few decades, the challenges it still faces, and what can be the way forward from where we stand right now. Now, let's start our discussion with a very basic idea of the UN Human Rights Council, or as many people used to call it, the UN Human Rights Office of High Commissioner. Now, as I said earlier, this is a UN body made responsible for ensuring that human rights as a concept is upheld around the entire world. This body was created in 2006 and it replaced the UN Commission on Human Rights. So, UN Commission on Human Rights used to be a body having a similar kind of mandate. It was replaced by the UN Human Rights Council. This is why it's a pretty recent body that came into being in 2006. The idea, as I said, is they give recommendations of human rights and the different types of laws that should be made by nations around the world. They also try and assess what are the different types of laws that nations around the world have made, whether they are effective or not. They also prepare a lot of reports pointing out those scenarios and those states that have not been able to uphold this idea. And as we will discuss later on in the class, they have given certain reports against India as well, raising concerns about human rights not being given their due importance in India. Now, let's start with the basic idea of what exactly are human rights. How do they work? Those of you who are political science students or who have taken political science as an optional subject in the UPSC would have read a lot about rights as a concept. As the name suggests, rights are protection given to you. For example, when you talk about fundamental rights are nothing but protection given to you against the action of the state. Fundamental rights, for example, tell you what the state cannot do against you. Now, thinkers around the world have categorized rights into various categories. For example, some are natural rights, some are considered as legal rights, then there are some social rights. Similarly, there are also human rights. Human rights are very similar to the concept of natural rights. The simple idea is, just by the virtue of being born as a human being, you deserve certain rights. Doesn't matter which country you were born in, doesn't matter when were you born, doesn't matter your financial situation, doesn't matter your social background. Just because you are a human being, that means you deserve to have certain rights. That is the idea of human rights. Doesn't matter if you're living in a very rich country like the US or you are living in a very poor country like say South Sudan, Eritrea, etc. In all these cases, every single citizen of these countries deserve those rights because you were born as a human being. Every government must take up the responsibility of giving these rights to their citizens. As I said earlier, there is no law that should prohibit these rights. There is no government action that should inhibit these rights when it comes to human rights as a concept, because they are the most basic requirements that every human being has. In order to achieve your true potential as a human being, in order to live a dignified life, in order to live a life where you can actually achieve what you are hoping and dreaming for, human rights form the essential concept. Now, you might also think, but sir, doesn't every country around the world give these rights to their citizens now? You may be surprised to know there are many countries around the world that do not give these rights to their citizens even now. Let's take a very simple example. Many of you would have read and heard about North Korea. Do you think the citizens in North Korea have these rights? Do you know when a North Korea citizen goes to a barber shop or goes to a salon, when he or she wants to have a haircut, the government of North Korea has decided that these are the only haircuts that are allowed. So every barber shop has a photo of 14 or 15 different types of haircuts, and you have to choose only one of those. You cannot have a haircut of your choice. The most basic freedoms are denied to people living in those countries. And this is not just North Korea. You also look at China. A lot of people in China have faced the wrath of their own government. Whenever the Chinese citizens come out on the streets against the atrocities of their own government, they are threatened, they are exploited, many of them are even sentenced just because they dared to speak against the government. These are some of the best known examples of human rights violations around the entire world. The Uyghur Muslims in China, there have been multiple reports stating how the Uyghur Muslims in China have been detained by the Chinese authority in prisons, in camps, where China tells the world we are just upskilling them, but in reality, even the most basic rights are denied to the citizens in China. This is where the concept of human rights becomes important. That because you are born as a human being, you deserve these rights for your own dignified presence. These have to be universal. When I say universal, that means irrespective of whichever country that you are born in. That is, irrespective of your nationality, irrespective of your status, irrespective of your background, your family, all of these things should not come in the way of deciding whether or not you deserve certain rights. These rights should be equal, they should be indivisible, available to everyone. No government action, no executive order, no law, no amendment should be allowed to take these away. Not just this, the governments even should have a responsibility of ensuring that these rights are not taken away from their citizens. The government should make efforts to ensure that these rights are safeguarded. There should be legal protection given to these rights, and they should not just be available to individuals, but also to groups. Those groups in the civil society which are working for the welfare of people. NGOs, for example, there are many other pressure groups that work in the interest of the civil society. Even they deserve to have certain rights. For example, you can also assume press as a group. We talk so much about the freedom of press. So it's not just the individual that should have these rights. Even associations, groups such as press, media, they should also have these rights available to them throughout the entire world. Now, the interesting part is, whenever we talk about human rights as a concept, the one thing that all of you would have read about or at least heard about is something called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Now, what exactly is this? What is the story of UDHR? Let's try and understand that. Before we go here, there is one very famous personality that every one of you should know about. This personality has a very famous surname. The personality that I'm talking about is Eleanor Roosevelt. Now, who was Eleanor Roosevelt? What is her role in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? Let's try and understand this. Every nation sends their representative in the UN to represent the country. So India sends usually IFS officers, Indian Foreign Services officers, but there are other officers, IAS officers also, that get a chance to represent India, to be the permanent representative of India at the UN. Now, if you talk about US, since US is a presidential form of government, the US president decides most of these appointments at high places. In US, there is a culture that the first lady of the US, that is the wife of the US president, and I'm saying wife because there has not been any female president in US at least till now. So the wife of the US president usually gets a chance to work on whatever project she likes, whatever project she's connected to. For example, when Barack Obama was the president, Barack Obama's wife, that is Michelle Obama, she was concerned a lot about the rights of children. So she had a lot of conferences, even about child rights, etc. Melania Trump, for example, when she was the first lady, she said that she wanted to work against online bullying, against cyberbullying. This tradition has been going on for a long time. Now you might be able to connect the Roosevelt surname. Franklin D. Roosevelt, that is the earlier US president. In fact, he was a US president when the Second World War was going on. When he was a president, his wife, that is Eleanor Roosevelt, she wanted to work in the area of human rights. Even after he did not remain the president, he passed away, then there was a new president that came into the picture. Even then, she was given this position to be the US representatives in the United Nations. So she remained the representative of America in the UN right after the Second World War. Her idea was that there should be certain basic human rights given to everyone around the world, irrespective of which country they belong to. It was her initiative that led to something called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This was the first ever international document which was discussed and adopted by the UN General Assembly in 1948. The idea was simple. It had a list of 30 rights, not very detailed, as one-liners. The idea was that nations around the world, while making their laws, making their constitution, should ensure that these rights are given to their members. The idea was simple. The nations around the world, while making their laws, their constitution, by passing their orders, should ensure that these rights should be given to their citizens. If you look at India's fundamental rights, a lot of them are very similar to what is written in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. For example, it talks about right to education, right to freedom of speech and expression, right to life, right against exploitation, right against slavery. Most of the provisions of our fundamental rights are very similar to these Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Even today, it is considered that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was one of the most significant document ever adopted by the UN General Assembly. Now, it was never binding on nations around the world because any UN resolution is not binding. Nations around the world then decide whether or not they want to accept this or they want to implement this or not. So it is not a binding document, but it is a guiding document for nations around the world who want to make laws and ensure that human rights are protected. The history of human rights goes back to 17th century to something called the Treaty of Westphalia. Now, what exactly was the Treaty of Westphalia? Let me also tell you about that. Europe that you see today, most part of it was actually one large empire called the Roman Empire. Now, this Roman Empire started to become very weak by the beginning of the 17th century and it broke up into various countries. The countries that you see today, France, Italy, Germany, Switzerland, UK, most of these countries came out to become new independent countries under something called the Treaty of Westphalia that led to different countries being formed on the basis of language. When these new countries were formed, it was also demanded that the nations should give similar rights to their citizens that they were demanding for themselves from the Roman Empire. That is, the citizens should also have the right to freedom, they should also have basic minimum rights given to them. So you can trace back the origin of human rights to the Treaty of Westphalia. However, in our modern history, contemporary history as you call it, 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights was the first major document, but it was not the only one. It was followed in 1966 by something called the International Covenants on Civil and Political Rights and Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. These together are considered as the bedrock of human rights around the entire world, which the nations are expected to follow and translate into their national laws. And India has also done this. As we discussed, if you look at most of our fundamental rights, they are very similar to the ones written in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The other idea that you must understand is that human rights as a concept also has various categories. I'll give you a very simple example. You look at what is happening in the US and what is happening in India. The kind of protest, the kind of demand that we see in the US is very different to what is happening in India. Let's take an example. A few months back, you would have seen the US saw large-scale protests about the right to abortion. Did you see that? The Supreme Court of the US took back the right to abortion. This divided the country into two parts. One part that talked about the right to life, and other part that talked about the right to choice. In other words, some people were pro-life and some people were pro-choice. Pro-choice, as the name suggests, but those people who demanded that the women should have the right to decide what happens with her body, she should have the choice. On the other hand, people who are against the idea of abortion, they are called pro-life. Now, can you imagine the same kind of a protest or movement taking place in India? Not necessarily. India also has movements, but those are not the same as are happening in US. The reason is simple. Every society is in a different stage. US got their independence in the 18th century. They are completing close to 250 years of their independence, while India, as an independent country, is not even 100 years old. So the demand for human rights that we have in India, the demand for political social rights that we have in India are not the same as we see in the US. In the US, the demands are very different. That is why we usually say that there are different generations of human rights. First generation are the most basic rights that every country first fought for, civil and political rights. For example, the freedom to ensure that everyone should take part in the political process. Everyone should have the right to vote. India, for example, has universal adult franchise. If you're above 18 years of age, you're not disqualified, you can go and vote in the elections. You can also take part in the elections. So basic civil and political rights, which form the very first generation of human rights. Once they are achieved, the societies move towards the second generation, that is economic, social and cultural rights. Economic rights, for example, means everyone should have the right to work. You should not be discriminated against at your workplace because you belong to a certain background, because you belong to a certain caste, or because you belong to a certain religion. Similarly, social, cultural rights, you should have the right to be proud of your heritage, to be proud of your culture, you should not be discriminated against. The third generation is where US is, or developed nations are right now, solidarity rights. Where as a society you demand changes. Be it the debate about abortion, be it the debate about the rights of transgenders. Every society around the world is at a different stage of their fight. The countries which became independent much later on are still struggling and the citizens are still demanding the basic civil and political rights. As I said, freedom to take part in politics, freedom of thought, freedom from arbitrary arrest, etc. These were the very first generation of human rights. Then came the second generation, which was freedom to work, healthcare, education, have paid holidays. For example, if you are in a formal job, you do get certain paid holidays as well. These are also part of basic human rights. Then the third generation, where the demand is about self-determination. An individual should be allowed to decide for himself or herself how do they want to identify as an individual. Protection of the environment, development, peace, etc. These are the different generations of human rights. And as I said, different nations are going through different stages of the demand and fight when it comes to generation of human rights. Now, let's come back and bring our focus onto UNHRC, the United Nations Human Rights Council. What nation are the members? How are they elected? What is their term? Not all the UN members are members of the UNHRC. How the body works is they have divided their membership based on different regions of the world. They have made sure that every region of the world is adequately represented in this body. So this council has a total of 47 members that are elected by members of UN General Assembly. So whenever you see UNGA, what we mean to say is United Nations General Assembly. I hope you're not confused here. This is United Nations General Assembly, that is the assembly or the meeting of all the members of the UN. The council members, whoever becomes a member of UNHRC, they have a 3-year term and they can't be elected immediately after 2 terms. Now, this is also a very important part of info, especially for the prelims exam. Because these kind of facts may confuse you later on. So 1 term is 3 years. Maximum that they can have as a complete or continuous term is 2 terms. So continuously they can be members for 6 years, but after that they will have to take a break. So 2 terms at a stretch is the maximum that is allowed. As I said earlier, the members of the UNHRC are the ones that are held responsible for ensuring that human rights as a concept is propagated around the entire world. They are the ones who have to prepare reports. They are the ones who have to look into cases of human rights violations around the entire world. The interesting part is if there's a nation that is a member of this body and there are allegations against that nation only. For example, let's say China becomes a member and then there are allegations against China of human rights violations, then that member may be removed. How? By 2/3 majority of the General Assembly. So please remember this. Members can be removed for human rights violations, but only by 2/3 majority by the General Assembly. So the General Assembly decides the members and they can remove the members as well. As I said, the membership is divided in such a manner that there is adequate representation given to all parts of the world. 13 seats are reserved for African states, 13 for Asia Pacific, 8 for Latin America, means South America, and the Caribbean states. So the Caribbean states are small islands that you see between North and South America. This is where, if you're cricket lovers, you would know the term West Indies. So the islands that are together called the West Indies, Jamaica, Barbados, Antigua, Trinidad, Tobago, all these islands are Caribbean states. 7 states are chosen from Western Europe and other areas of the world, while 6 seats are for Eastern European states. This is how the membership of the UNHRC works. Now, if there is a body that works, there has to be a leadership as well to preside over the meetings, to decide the agenda. How does that work? So there is a bureau that works for the council. It provides elected leadership. The bureau has 5 people, which is 1 president and 4 vice presidents. They represent the 5 regional groups. They all serve for 1 year in accordance with the annual cycle. So after every year, the president and the vice president change. Again, let's not be confused. The member nations would have a 3-year term, but from the member nations, when you choose president and the vice presidents, they have a 1-year term. So when the year cycle completes, they have to be changed on an annual basis. Now, what is the structure and what are the functions of this organization? What do they do exactly? What is their day-to-day responsibility like? What kind of reports do they prepare? Mainly, their functions can be categorized into these 4 categories. First, Universal Periodic Review Working Group. As the name suggests, they release periodic reports of the world about how exactly are human rights being upheld by nations around the world. Are there some key concerning areas? Should we be worried about certain nations? Should some nations try and use their leverage over another nation that is not upholding the idea of human rights? Second, they have an advisory committee group that advises about how human rights can be upheld and can be strengthened. We have the complaints procedure group where complaints can be filed against different states for human rights violations, and we have the UN Special Procedure Group that also works along with the other arms of the UN. All these have their separate functions, and all these together ensure that the UNHRC works as a robust independent body. What are the functions? As the name suggests, very generic functions. They have to understand, propagate, and strengthen the idea of human rights all around the world. They have to check whether human rights are being upheld or not. What are the governments doing to protect the rights of the people? Also, if a government had promised something in the UN, whether or not the government is abiding by their promises or not, whether people are being able to get their human rights living in a country or not, all these are functions of the UNHRC. These are very generic functions, nothing very specific. I'm sure just by understanding the name of this body, the name of this organization, you will be able to write down what the main functions. Similarly, they also ensure that worldwide, whoever are accused of violating human rights, there is proper investigation that is undertaken on all these issues, and those who are the perpetrators of human rights, they are called out. They also ensure that countries around the world which have a bad track record of maintaining human rights, lens is usually always kept on them. Any different initiative or any new initiative that these countries have taken to again compromise on human rights, all these initiatives are under the scanner of this agency, that is the UNHRC. UNHRC has also looked into other issues which are usually not considered as in direct connection with human rights, but actually they are. Issues related to terrorism, climate change, racial discrimination, the rights of the LGBTQ community, poverty, freedom of speech, all these have essentially been considered as an integral part of human rights. If you are affected by any terrorist activity, if you are affected by climate change, where you did not do anything wrong, but just because industries around you, government around you, they did not give attention to climate change, your human rights can also be affected. You will not be able to live a safe, healthy life because of the increasing sea level around you because of the climate change situation. You might be affected by natural calamities, drought, flood. All these are somewhere connected to climate change. Similarly, which countries are discriminating against the LGBTQ community, and there are many, many conservative countries around the world which actually have laws where people who are from the LGBTQ community are prosecuted. Many of them are even sentenced. Many of them are sent to some torture facilities where the governments think that just by torturing them, they can change the sexual orientation of the person. Also, there are certain government policies that are forcefully keeping people poor and are not allowing freedom of speech and expression. All these are looked into by the UNHRC in their day-to-day functioning. There is no one country that can claim to be the head of the UNHRC. As we discussed, there are 47 nations that work together, and the membership comes in from the UN General Assembly itself. Because the membership has been defined in such a manner that every region of the world has adequate representation, no one single country can claim that they are not being represented here at the UNHRC. The most important document published by the agency is the Universal Periodic Review Report. As I discussed earlier, this is a kind of a general report about the worldwide status of human rights, whether or not there is some alarming change in the situation of human rights, where is the area where the nations must focus upon. They also have independent experts employed with them that keep on sending official report and data to the UNHRC to compile all of that and publish in the Periodic Review Report. Now, let's focus on India and its connection with the UNHRC. Now, India's connection with this agency is very interesting. It's interesting in the sense that India has been a member of this agency multiple times. Even right now, India is presently a member of the UNHRC. However, it also has to be understood that there have been some problems between the two sides. For example, the UNHRC has published certain reports which have not gone down well with India. The UNHRC, in its reports, has pointed out that Indian government has not taken into consideration the human rights of people living in Kashmir. Also, as per the agency, the Citizenship Amendment Act has led to violation of human rights of people living in various parts of the country, but the government has not listened to their concerns. As expected, the government of India has categorically denied these reports, has categorically said that these are not true, these are not based on correct facts. The government of India said that the reports are malicious, tendentious, and motivated. That these reports are specifically made so that India can be shown in the bad light. This is not the first time that India is a member of the UNHRC. In fact, this is our 6th term. We are members of the UNHRC from 2022 to 2024, as you can see. It's a 3-year term. We have had earlier terms as well. Continuously from 2006 to 2010. These were 2 continuous terms. Here also right now, we are continuing our last term. As we discussed earlier, a country can have a maximum of 2 consecutive terms of 3 years each, and then you will have to be removed. Now, India also has another very interesting connection with the UNHRC. See, how a country votes in the UN General Assembly, in the Security Council, or other organs of UN such as the UNHRC is actually seen by the nations around the world, because this is a great indication of where your foreign policy stands. A lot of times, when nations around the world expect India to vote in a certain manner, India actually does not vote like that, because our national interests are not served. Let me give you a few examples. Let's talk about the Ukraine-Russia war. As expected, ever since the Ukraine-Russia war has started, there have been multiple resolutions against Russia introduced in the UN Human Rights Council. There was a resolution to remove Russia from this body. Now, as you can expect, India did not vote in favor of this resolution. We abstained from voting. Abstain means there are 3 options that a nation gets to vote when there is a UN resolution. Either you vote in favor, or you vote against, or you abstain means you do not vote. India has abstained from voting multiple times against Russia, and the Russian government has appreciated this, saying that we are very happy that at least India is among those few nations that are supporting us. Now, this is understandable. You expect India would vote in favor of Russia. We are still buying oil from Russia in huge quantity ever since the Ukraine-Russia war started, mainly because we are getting the oil at a discounted price. However, there is another very interesting example that is about China. Now, what exactly is this? China has the Uyghur Muslim population in the Xinjiang region. Now, because ethnically the Uyghur Muslims are very different to the other population that China has been accused of torturing the Uyghur Muslims. Thousands and lakhs of them are kept in detention camps. They are not given any rights, and even the Islamic nations around the world do not speak up against China. There was a resolution against this, and interestingly, India abstained from voting. Now, why exactly did that happen? Should we not vote against China? Now, this is where you have to understand something. India usually has a policy that whenever there are such kind of resolutions that talk about internal matters of a certain country, take example of Sri Lanka as well. Sri Lanka went through a very deadly civil war. India was also indirectly connected to it, where LTTE was fighting against the Sri Lankan army. Internationally, there have been a lot of talks that an international team should be formed to go to Sri Lanka, collect evidence, and investigate the matter, who should be held responsible, who should not be held responsible. India abstained from that as well. Why? India has a tendency that whenever there is a resolution which talks about interfering in any country's internal matters, India usually abstains from voting. Now, why is that the case? Because India believes that if similar resolution comes into the UN connected to Kashmir, let's say there is a similar resolution that an international team should come to Kashmir to collect evidence and investigate, would we like that? Obviously not. That is why India usually has this policy that unless it is extreme, we usually abstain from voting whenever there's a resolution about an international team or any international mediators coming into a specific country to investigate a certain matter, because we think that the same kind of resolution, if it is introduced against India, we would not like anyone to vote. So we expect these countries to return the favor when the time comes. This is why we usually follow this policy. Now, we have talked a lot about the structure, the functions, what do they do, India and UNHRC. Now it's time to talk about what exactly have been the achievements of UNHRC. What have they done in the past? Do they deserve certain accolades for this or not? The usual tendency is whenever you talk about UN or a UN-related agency, you criticize these agencies for not doing enough, and that is not false. In most of the cases, the UN or the UN agencies have not been able to fulfill their mandate for various reasons. Either they're handicapped because the powerful nations hold the veto power, either they just don't have the resources or the money to take any action. However, even with all of those roadblocks coming in the way of the UNHRC, they still have certain achievement that you should know about. For example, in Myanmar, the UNHRC has highlighted human rights issues multiple times. As you know, Myanmar has had a very violent history. It's a neighboring country that is under the rule of the military, the junta as you call it, for a couple of years now. Even before that, Myanmar has been related to the Rohingya violence. As you know, the Rohingya community were forced out of Myanmar's Rakhine province. There were allegations that the Rohingyas have been deprived of their human rights, there have been violence conducted against them by the state, and that is why they're forced to move out. The UNHRC created an independent investigative agency to collect evidence on human rights violations within Myanmar. This was a real win for the UNHRC. Similarly, in Yemen, a country that has been going through a deadly civil war, for Yemen also, an independent international investigative mechanism was set up to ensure that human rights violations in Yemen are recorded. In fact, recently there was a news that there is a kind of a peace agreement that is being signed in Yemen where the two supporting parties, that is Saudi Arabia and Iran, Iran supporting the Houthis, Saudi Arabia supporting the Yemen government, where these two are coming together for a peace agreement. This is also where UN has played a very important role. So in the history of UN, there are not many achievements that they can boast of, but yes, these are a few handful of those achievements. Similarly, the UNHRC also has to take all the accolades because they have been working relentlessly for ensuring that the rights of persons with disabilities are given to them. They have called all the countries to adopt the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in 2008. As you know, in India also, people with disability do get certain reservation government jobs. Few years back, the government of India actually extended the list of those disabilities which will be eligible for all these government benefits. So it's not just India. Many countries around the world have been making a lot of efforts to ensure that persons with disability get their rights, get the rights that they deserve, and the UNHRC has to take the responsibility for that. They have been very good in this field. Not just this, with climate change as well, the UNHRC has been successful in driving the focus of a lot of people on this issue, which is extremely important, yet somewhere down the line it is ignored by nations around the world. Many nations believe that climate change actually is a roadblock in their road to development. This kind of a thinking that we can either select preserving our climate or we can select development, this has to go away. The UNHRC is playing a role in that regard as well. The UNHRC in 2021 recognized the human right to clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. You would know India's Supreme Court also has expanded the definition of Article 21 as a fundamental right to include all these things. Even India's right to a safe, healthy environment is a part of right to life, and the same has been said by UNHRC as well. For Israel also, there have been multiple occasions where the UNHRC has pointed out Israel about their human rights violations. In 2015, for example, the body voted a resolution to ensure accountability and justice for all violations of international law in the occupied Palestinian territory, including the eastern part of Jerusalem. The UNHRC repeatedly has been pointing out that Israel is depriving the people living in West Bank, especially from their human rights, and they should be questioned by the authorities around the world. The sad part is not many countries question Israel on all these human rights violations, but at least the UNHRC cannot be faulted for doing their job in this regard. They have also condemned the expansion of Israeli settlements in the occupied territory. As you know, if you have been following the Israel-Palestine issue closely, you will see that even in the West Bank area, which is a very small area that is still left with Palestine, even in that area, Israel is actually building its own settlements. A lot of Israeli citizens have been settled by the government in the West Bank area. They have been given a lot of protection by the government of Israel. The government of Israel has said that don't worry, nothing will happen to you, we will protect you. This seems to be an attempt by the Israeli government to actually take over even more area from Palestine. And those people living in the area of West Bank from the side of Palestine have not been given even their basic rights. You look at the Gaza Strip side, that is even worse. Towards the Gaza Strip, people don't even have the most basic amenities like drinking water, electricity, etc. And Israel has been held accountable for most of these violations. They have prepared similar reports for Afghanistan. Ever since the US has retracted from Afghanistan, Taliban has come back to power. Since then, there have been multiple cases of human rights violations in Afghanistan. The UNHRC has expressed concerns over how the Taliban government is running, over how the women, despite all the promises made by the Taliban, are not being given their basic human rights, such as right to education, such as the right to freedom of choice, such as the right to even go out in the open without being accompanied by a male. All these are initiatives taken by the UNHRC. Now, you might argue, but sir, can you call these reports as the achievements? Because at the end of the day, all this list that we talked about, these are just reports, resolutions, initiatives. None of these are any concrete actions, and this is a big problem with these organizations. Organizations such as the UNHRC do not have so much power that they can actually take action against a certain government for not fulfilling their promises. If a certain sovereign government decides not to give human rights to their citizens or decides to violate the human rights, there is not much that the UNHRC can do. So they do face many challenges. Another big challenge is many countries believe that how they choose their reports, how they choose where to focus on is very selective. The UNHRC is being criticized for only going after a few countries. For example, why is it that their reports are only based on Israel? Why not Saudi Arabia? Why not China? Why not Russia? It is an open secret that these nations around the world do not have a great track record when it comes to providing human rights to their citizens. But why is it that we still don't see any reports against these nations? Why is it that we just see reports against Israel? Why is it that we keep on seeing reports against Myanmar? Because maybe these nations are too powerful to come into the radar of UNHRC. Not just this, they have been focusing a lot on Israel-Palestine conflict. On the other hand, some of the other conflicts around the world have been ignored very easily, especially in Africa. There are so many conflicts, there are so many instances of interference by Western nations, all of that is ignored. Over here, the allegations made from the other side are usually ignored by the UNHRC. So they are accused of being very selective, which nation to choose, which area to choose, and they conveniently ignore the other side. Second big problem that I just discussed. At the end of the day, all that they can do is prepare reports, pass certain resolutions, make certain announcements, or at max investigate a certain matter. But beyond that, there's nothing that they can do. They can only advise the Security Council. If you look at the UN Charter, the responsibility of maintaining peace around the world is given to the UN Security Council. So there's 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council that have to take action. So these members of the Security Council can be advised by the UNHRC, but this advice is, as you can imagine, not binding. If these permanent members of the UN Security Council don't want to take any action, there will be no action taken. Many countries make big promises to UNHRC that we'll do this, we'll do that, we will accept your recommendation, but in reality, nothing happens. Sri Lanka, for example, has been accused of this. Ever since the civil war in Sri Lanka ended after the end of the LTTE, there have been allegations against Sri Lanka that Sri Lankan government is protecting those who were responsible for the deadly civil war, for the killing of thousands of innocent people in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka has been asked to take action against them, but they keep on delaying the matter. They keep on saying, yes, we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll investigate the matter, we'll hold the people accountable, but nothing really comes of it. They make promises and the promises are forgotten. This is also one of the biggest problems with the UNHRC, that a country can openly make a false promise to them and they hardly can do anything. Related to this, there's a problem of limited resources. See, at the end of the day, for any such international agency to work, when they say we are investigating a matter, we are forming an independent agency, we are looking into this issue, we are preparing a report, all of that requires money at the end of the day. When you form a team, let's say of 10 people, and you ask them to go to Myanmar to investigate a certain matter, who will pay for their travel? Who will pay for their stay? Who will pay for the hard work that they are doing? The problem is that the UNHRC doesn't have those resources. At the end of the day, the UN is working on the donations given by the member nations. So if there are no donations, if the resources are limited, obviously the capacity of these organizations to work also is extremely, extremely limited. The UNHRC has also been accused of polarizing certain members in the form of reports. That is, because their reports are not accepted by every country, some countries say the report is given just because they want to create a divide between certain groups. So they have been accused of having their own hidden agenda as well, depending upon which are the countries which are the current members of the UNHRC. The other side of the story is that they do not engage with a lot of countries around the world. We have to understand the reality. If the concept of human rights has to be made a universal concept that every country accepts, it will only happen with the blessings and support of the powerful nations, the rich nations, US, European nations. But the UNHRC does not really engage with them. For example, US has continuously said we are not interested in UNHRC. Why? Because US says you keep on preparing reports against Israel. Israel is a close friend. You don't prepare any reports against China. You don't have any reports against Russia, so we don't trust you. So they are not being able to take different countries into confidence, especially the countries that can actually help the UNHRC in achieving their mandate. And that is also a big challenge that they are facing. And these hurdles are not easy to overcome. Now, having said that, there has to be a way forward. What can we do from now on to ensure that UNHRC as a body becomes more powerful? First, the most important thing, strengthen them with more resources, give them more tools. We have to believe in this body. We have to understand that if we have given them a responsibility of maintaining human rights, rather than judging them they're doing a good job or not, at least first give them resources and enough tools to make a difference. Only then you can judge whether or not you are successful or not. Secondly, address the bias and selectivity. Rather than just focusing on a few states, focus on other countries around the world as well. Look at the concerns of smaller states as well that are usually ignored by most of these organizations. The countries that are considered as continuous violators of human rights should not be included as members in the first place itself, so that there is at least some form of punishment or repercussions that are given. We have to increase cooperation with bigger countries such as the US and European countries as well, and ensure there's a continuous dialogue between the countries that are responsible, the governments that have the responsibility to make and safeguard the laws, and the UNHRC. The UNHRC alone deciding to preserve human rights will never be a success. The UNHRC at the end of the day has to work along with the governments to ensure that the collaboration becomes a success, and that can only happen if the two sides work together. This is everything that we need to know about UNHRC as a body. How does it work? The challenges it is facing. What is the way forward? How can we improve its working? How can we strengthen this body to achieve the mandate? There are a couple of practice questions here so that you can see what kind of questions are asked or can be asked. This is a question from Prelims point of view. With reference to UN Human Rights Council, consider the following statements. Number one, it is an intergovernment body within the UN whose mission is to promote and protect human rights around the world. The members of the council serve a period of 3 years and they are not eligible for immediate election after serving 2 consecutive terms. And third, till now, India has been elected to the council 8 times. I think it's a pretty easy question if you have been paying attention to what we were discussing. The first is the generic statement is absolutely correct. I thought the easiest statement once was the first one. The mandate of this organization is to protect and promote human rights. Second and third are factual statements. We have discussed earlier as well how a member of UNHRC has a 3-year term. The maximum continuous tenure that they have is 2 terms. After that, they have to be given away. So second is also true. Third is India has now been elected for the 8th time. Is that true? No. We discussed India right now is serving the 6th term. So India has been elected 6 times and not 8 times. So the correct answer here would be A. 1 and 2 are correct. The third statement here is wrong. As I said, it is 6 times and not 8 times. Now, this is the kind of question that we refer in the mains examination. Discuss the role of the UN Human Rights Council in promoting and protecting human rights around the world. What are the challenges faced by the council in this regard and how can they be addressed? I think we have discussed enough content and data for you to be very, very comfortable in answering this question. You have to start your introduction with some factual information about the UNHRC, how many members, the membership, their role, what do they do, the functions, and then talk about the challenges that we have discussed, their biasness, lack of resources, how they don't have a lot of engagement with powerful nations around the world, how they have been accused of being selective in their approach. This brings us to the end of the class. I hope this topic was very clear to all of you. If you do see any question from this topic, either in the prelims or in the main exam, I think you are in very, very safe hands to answer any question from this. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next class. Have a good day ahead. Bye-bye. Jai.